The Longevity Lounge is proudly brought to you by AIA Australia, dedicated to helping Australians live healthier, longer, better lives. Hello and welcome to the Longevity Lounge. Today we're joined by James.Z.G.Buckley, an expert in meditation, hypnotherapy and human behaviour. James brings a wealth of knowledge on harnessing the power of the mind to improve mental resilience, reduce anxiety and navigate chronic health challenges. In this episode, he'll share insights on how mindfulness practices can enhance well-being, promote longevity, and transform everyday life. Get ready for a deep dive into the intersection of mental mastery and healthy living. This is one you won't want to miss.
So, James, welcome to the lounge.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
It's an honour and a privilege.
Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fascinating podcast today, exploring all things meditation, hypnosis, general well-being. Where do we start?
Where would you like to start, Carl?
Well, probably your story is always a good place. You know, we look at these people making a profound difference, and it's coming from somewhere, from their own experience or something that's happened. Maybe we could, if you're comfortable, you're sharing your story and how you've ended up here.
Sure. So my background, as I've shared with you already, was my father was of Indigenous background from the Palawa tribe in Tasmania, and he was put into a boarding home at the age of 6, severely abused there. Amazing man, beautiful heart. But out of all of that, he learnt to cope with that trauma with unsavoury ways, alcohol, drug abuse, all of that kind of stuff. And so that sparked in me wanting to understand what was happening there. And unfortunately, I followed the same path. At the age of 14, I left home. I fell into the hands of gangs. I was living in the house with the son of the president of a very infamous gang in Tasmania. And at the age of 18, I lost a girlfriend to suicide. And that really put me on a fork in the road to see if I was going to continue on that path or make a change. And I made the change, fortunately enough.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and that change for me was meditation, breath work and hypnosis.
How do you find that in Tasmania? How does that happen?
Not
that there's anything wrong with Tasmania, but it just seems quite bizarre.
Indeed, it does. Well, there's a Buddhist centre there that I lived in for several years called the Choki Gaksal Thigsum Tibetan Buddhist Centre from the Karma Kagyu lineage.
That's a mouthful.
It is. Yeah. And the abbot of the Buddhist Centre, Venerable Chögyam Lama Shedrup, fled the Chinese occupation in 1956 from Tibet into India over the Himalayas. He lost his mother on the way and he fathered me. He became my spiritual father. He was there for my wedding in 2019. And in the Buddhist Centre there, I had profound experiences. I felt a profound amount of love and compassion that I'd never experienced. And I wanted to understand what that was and how that worked. It truly transformed me. And my path and trajectory for 22 years has been understanding or researching, practicing and teaching the neuroscience of how those things work.
Wow. It's just a lot in just a short period of time that you came out with there.
So we live in a world now where 20 years ago you talk about meditation and someone would quickly label you a hippie and think you're at Confest on the Murray.
Sure.
At now, meditation and well-being and mindfulness and loving kindness is somewhat central in lots of organisations, in the way that teams prepare themselves for events, in personal practice. What's changed? So how do we go from this fringe practice or fringe consideration into something that's so central now?
We live in a magnificent time where science is catching up with what many people have known for many thousands of years, and it's validating that for the conscious mind. Most of us exist in the conscious mind, and we need those validations. We need that understanding to be able to transition into those profound experiences that we can have. So I think we're lucky. I think we live in a time where those things are coalescing together and providing us the science that the conscious mind needs to be able to activate the unconscious processes that produce those very profound experiences.
And can I get to the science with you pretty quickly? So
Absolutely.
I've watched a video, a quantum physics video, talking about the impact on a cellular level of meditation.
Yes.
So we talk about it being calm and finding equanimity and balance and not being non-reactive and so many things that are demonstratively helpful in our day-to-day life. But at a cellular level, inside our body, what's happening?
Well, our brain is producing 70 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And those thoughts are not things that are in the sky, they're neurochemical events, and they trigger the hypothalamus to release proteins that dock into every single cell in the body. And over time, those cells modify themselves so that they can take in those proteins more efficiently. Essentially, they become addicts to those proteins. And so our thoughts are the steering wheel to the vehicle. We're talking about the engine and the heart and all of these types of things. Our thoughts are the steering wheel. However, the way that society and culture is now, our thoughts are perhaps somewhat like a messed up fishing net. And it's very difficult for people to navigate that.
And if we have 70 to 90,000 thoughts a day, how many of those do we actually consciously know about?
Not many.
I would have thought that. That's a lot of thoughts.
Depends who you are. Probably less.
Yeah, that's right. It varies from person
And you
to
think more
person.
for you?
Probably more for
Because you're like a pretend professor.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So am I. The latest science is that we...
Wouldn't be many of those, though, would it? How many?
No. Well, we process 400 billion bits of information every single second from the moment of our conception.
Jeez.
And our conscious awareness of that is 2,000 bits. Now, I'm a very pragmatic, I may not seem like it, but I'm a very pragmatic, sceptical person. And so I wanted to understand what that was and quantify that. And so if we put it into marbles, 400 billion marbles goes into 186 Olympic swimming pools. And our conscious awareness of that is 2,000 bits of information every single second, and that would fit into a small moving box. And so our conscious awareness of what's flowing in through our five senses is a very small, infinitesimal amount.
It's tiny.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So
I'd like to add to that point that there is a part of us in the unconscious mind that loves and cares for us more than anything else. And it wants us to be happy. It wants us to be healthy. It heals our cuts. It breathes us while we sleep. It takes care of everything for us. And we just need to tune into that and activate that and work with that and align with that. And we can create magnificent miracles in our lives.
When you first started in this journey, and the science wasn't there to back it up,
Yes.
I mean, where did the belief come from the start for you to go, I'm on the right path here?
The experience.
Okay.
The absolute experience with inside of myself and the transformation inside of myself, and over time witnessing that in other people. I don't do anything to anybody. I help people realise that they have all of that power inside of themselves, and I get to watch those transformations happen, and that reinforces that belief for me.
For me, it was the 80s that I first came in contact with hypnotherapy.
Yes.
Through sports psychologists,
Yes.
training for the Olympics.
Yes.
And then when I started doing Ironman, and for me it was a case of trying to understand how I could be the best and whether there were things out there that I could use to make myself a better athlete and to perform better at a higher level. And that was my first experience with a leading sports psychologist in Australia who used hypnotherapy as a way to get the best out of me in a race.
Yes.
So that was my first, beginning in that area, which was great. I found it really, really helpful.
Amazing. And really grateful that people like yourself are at the forefront, like spearheads, really opening up those doors for other people, we could say normal
It's probably,
people.
and for a different reason, right? So people are finding it for other reasons, and people that come to you would come for whatever reasons they are. But for me, it was just because of being an athlete. You're trying to make your mind as strong as you can to get the best performance out of your body on a given day.
Absolutely.
And it was very, very helpful. And I used to use that just that meditation and just that sort of how would you call it? Just that reinforcement in the mind,
Yes.
leading into major races as part of my practice.
Yes.
A week out from when I was going to race, and that was part of my protocols and what I did.
And it's imperative now.
Yeah, well, it became sort of something that that you just bring into your life in general without even thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
And the science is really strong on that. There was many research pieces that have been done on it, but one that I remember clearly is they had 3 different groups of people. One group of the people were pulling on a physical spring for, I think it was 15, 20 minutes a day. They were pulling on a physical spring. After a period of 3 weeks, they had a 25% increase in strength in that finger. We know that works that way. They had a group that did nothing. They didn't pull on a string or anything like that. They had another group that was mentally rehearsing, so visualising, practicing, perhaps not visually, but mentally rehearsing, however people do that. We may get to that point at some stage. Those people that were mentally rehearsing pulling on the string had a 24.5% increase in strength, and they never touched the string. Jeez. Which is the power of thoughts on the body is almost exactly the same as doing the physical thing itself. So we have a profound capacity to shift the cells in our body and change those things in our body much more than we could possibly imagine.
I think it's interesting to talk about why we don't do more of this. You know, the recent Olympics, Sakibara on camera very quickly said, I visualise this. I visualise every single heat. And with BMX, you know, they have to do the same thing many times. And she basically just was, if you looked at her, it was almost a machine-like. You know, she followed the same line. She won every heat. And she said, I didn't see it any different. This is how I saw it.
That's right.
And so I looked to, as a contrast to that, my partner, if I get her to sit still for a minute, she probably will be in tears because it's too much for her.
Interesting.
Let alone being still and then finding that sense of balance before visualising something in the future.
Interesting.
Tell me about your experience as a practitioner.
I think as a general understanding of our society and culture, at least from the Industrial Revolution, is that everything has been driven as an external or an externalisation of our life. And so there's through the schooling system, the industrial schooling system, which is what we live in now, is everything about being externally focused and what you can do externally. I don't remember, I left school at a very young age. I left school in grade 8, but there was nothing that I learnt that was internally focused or understanding how this system works, how this machine works. No one taught me how to drive this car, so to speak. And so I think that that's just where we exist as humanity. I know there's a few cultures that over time have taught those things, but our modern culture, we don't teach those things. And so people are somewhat hamstrung by that. People are very lost. They're sitting inside of a car, they don't even know how to turn on the ignition. And so when they learn those things, perhaps it can be a bit confronting or a bit overwhelming, something along those lines. But obviously it's different for every individual. Yeah.
So we've touched on meditation, we've touched on hypnosis. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us a little bit about them independently?
Sure. Well, meditation in the Tibetan language, in the Tibetan culture, the translation of meditation translates to gom, which means to become familiar with. So the purpose of meditation is to become familiar with the mind and how this system works. Self-hypnosis is how to make this system do the things that you want it to do.
It's a great and a concise answer, isn't it?
And easy to understand. Yeah.
I can go much deeper on that, but I don't want to waffle on too much.
I think we need to get a little bit further into the practicality of this. So people listening that say, this sounds great, you've sold it to me, I can see.
What do I do? How do I use it?
Well, probably two things, actually. Why should I still is a question people are asking.
Sure.
Like I can see that, yes, that sounds nice, but really why should I, particularly in the context of longevity?
Yes.
Like how's this going to serve me?
Yes.
And the second part is, how do I do it?
Yes.
I mean, there's just on that too. I mean, there's not a given week that you just don't go through challenges in life.
Yes.
And you have moments where you get out of bed and you just don't feel as good as the day before in your brain, in your mind, you know, and challenges come up and, you know, I mean, we sit here and it just seems so obvious that you're in your own head and the things that you believe between the 6 inches between your ears becomes your reality, right?
Yes.
I mean, it just, you know, you sit back and you go, my youngest is doing year 12 right now, and she's trying to memorise, you know, things in biology and all the rest of it, and you literally just go and take in this information and go, why the hell aren't we actually getting better at understanding ourselves and how we tick and how we can actually make ourselves happier
Yes.
and live in a world where it's brighter for us all the time, which
Yes.
is what you do. It's just, man, I literally sit here going, I just, in some ways don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got lucky because I was an athlete that I just got brought into your space
Yes.
just by chance,
Yes.
which helped me a lot. Yeah, but for most people, that's not the case.
Absolutely. For most people,
Not the case.
they feel victimised, or they experience a sense of victimhood to their mind and their body, and they feel somewhat trapped inside of their mind and body. And that's just because they haven't been given the user's manual or the owner's manual to be able to drive.
So what do they need to do? What do people need to do? Can you go and do a course yourself?
Before we get there,
Yeah.
let's go back to the question why. Like,
Yeah.
I've been meditating for 40 years.
Yes.
I know why, but I'm not the audience. And to your point about being victims in their mind, a lot of them don't feel that. A lot of them feel like, what are you talking about? Why? If I've got half an hour, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some exercise, or I'm going to go and get on my phone and do something. They don't see the benefit in this. They're not prioritising this above other things. So I'd love for you to talk to us about why this actually matters, particularly in the context of longevity, and then get into what does this look like for the everyday person?
Sure. Well, not meditating and using the science of hypnosis is being a victim. You're then opening yourself up to being influenced by external forces rather than being in control of the forces inside of you that can direct you to where you want to go. And so although you may be experiencing life in a way where you're happy and content, at some stage you're going to go through a cycle and a phase where those things aren't going to be there. We all experience that. That's our life. The law of impermanence in Tibetan Buddhism is that everything changes, nothing stays the same, everything's in a constant state of change. So the more we try to attach ourselves to the external things in our relationships, the mountains, the trees, this dimension that we exist in, then we're going to come to a sense of suffering at some stage. And so if we don't practice now, we may get caught with our pants down and you may wish that you had done those things when you had the opportunity to do so. So I would say that the reason why is to be able to drive this vehicle the way that you want it to and keep it healthy and happy the way that you want it to for as long as this journey goes.
This program is proudly brought to you by Ascend Performance Collagen Protein. Ascend Performance Collagen Protein uses the highest quality ingredients, is dairy-free and tastes great. Each serve contains 25 grams of protein and includes Tenderfort for joint and ligament support, as well as gut matrix to help support a healthy and diverse gut microbiome using a unique combination of pre, pro, and postbiotic ingredients. To find out more or purchase, go to ascendperformance.com.au.
From what you're saying there, it's you don't know. We had Warwick Bishop talking about heart attacks on the program, and it's too late. You start seeing the signs. He was very adamant. It's too late. We need to get to the preventative stage.
Yes.
This seems very similar to that. That before we go through hardship, grief, crisis with no tools, we've got an opportunity here to sort of build a repertoire or a quiver to be able to draw from in those times. Is that right?
Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's been my mentor since 2004, my wife and I did our honeymoon with him and another group of people in the Mediterranean for 2 weeks in 2019, and he would say that we can change in frustration and pain, or we can choose to change in happiness and joy. And so
Brilliant.
We're driven by pain and pleasure, and we can use those things to our advantage. Unfortunately, the human organism mostly waits for pain to motivate and inspire.
Which would be, you'd see that a lot with your patients.
Well, all of my patients. Correct. Nobody comes to me saying that they don't have
I'm
any
all good.
problems and I'm very good. How are you?
Can you add to this?
I would love to have a patient like that. Unfortunately, no.
So then, in terms of the practical necessity of the practice of where do people start? They've never done this before.
Yes.
They now believe in it. They might have read A New Earth or one of Eckhart Tolle's books or something like that and thought, wow, this is something. What do I do?
I would say that breath work is the intersection point or the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And that is because the breath can be conscious and unconscious. Your breath is breathing you while you sleep. It's been breathing us while we're here the entire time. However, we can choose to modify and modulate and change our breath in ways that can change the chemistry of our brain and body. And we start to get our hands on the steering wheel of the unconscious mind by entering in through breath work. So breath work is a very profound way to start that process. Certain breath work can shut off what we call the default mode network part of the brain, or the monkey mind. And so it's a really easy way for people to have a profound experience and go, wow, actually I'm not all of that stuff. There's something else here, and below that there's even more. And so my suggestion for all of the listeners is that you start with some gentle form of breath work, even the simple practice of closing your eyes, which creates interoception or internal perception, closing your eyes and focusing on nasal breath, which puts you into the parasympathetic nervous system, will simply just get you focused on that magical process. And we know that that starts to bring more blood flow, more glucose and oxygen into that forebrain. That forebrain or frontal lobe links into every other part of the brain. Once that part of the brain switches on, it's like the CEO, and it starts telling everybody what to do, and everything in the mind and body starts to become highly organised.
And is that first stage of the building awareness from your brain to your body and what's going on? I mean, I'm big on breath work as well.
Yes.
And we spoke earlier. I did the Oxygen Advantage course with Patrick
Amazing
McEwen
program.
And did the advanced course and learned a hell of a lot.
Yes.
And a big believer in all of the stuff that you're talking about. The breathing side, and when you start talking about what's the difference between that type of breathing and the Wim Hof sort of style of breathing, where you're literally doing it in a completely different way.
I really honour and respect what Wim Hof has done, and he has popularised and brought breathwork into the mainstream and into the awareness of the public, which I think is amazing. However, it's an extreme sport as far as I'm concerned.
It is an extreme sport.
That, to me, if we're talking in sense of the gym, that's like somebody just lifting weights, not stretching, not doing any cardio. It's just one facet, perhaps even just one exercise. It's a very small derivative. The Wim Hof method comes directly from Tummo practice. Tummo translates from the Tibetan language to mean inner fire, and so the Wim Hof method is a very small slither or a small derivative of Tummo practice, which is an enormous complex system.
It's that hyperventilation type, extreme type breathing, where you could take someone and through that rapid short breathing space and building up carbon dioxide, you can literally not have to take a breath for 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Correct.
Do it through
24 minutes.
Yeah, through a series of exercises. And it, for me personally, when I was right into it, it was something I do once a week, and I do it just as a way of sort of just changing the mode of my body, and just that feeling of just feeling like you're floating above yourself, and it gives you an amazing feeling. But it's something that you need to do and be quite careful with.
Yes.
Because it's not something for the faint-hearted, and you need to understand what you're doing before you start.
Correct. And I would say that there's a foundation of even just understanding how the breath works before you go into those extreme types of sports. Nasal breathing is the best way to start. Just focusing on nasal breath puts us into the parasympathetic nervous system, switches on all of those very healthy things. It's very beneficial for the heart. And so I would say that is the foundation and the place for most people to start. The Wim Hof method is a really exciting, fun thing to do, but you don't get drunk every day. You do that on a very small, semi-regular basis, would be my suggestion.
And James, in terms of that practical suggestion, you can live in a Brahma Kumari retreat if you want. You can go and do a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat where the first 3 or 4 days is Anapana or the breath meditation, or you can get the Calm app. So out of all of that, what does good look like?
I would say it's all good, Carl. All of that, and whatever resonates with people is amazing, and you should follow those paths. But everything is inside of us. All of those systems, all of those teachings has come from inside of us. All of the knowledge and wisdom from our ancestors exists inside of us. The 400 billion bits of information that we've been processing every single second is also our ancestors that process that information every single second. And that also exists inside of our genes and our DNA, which is why we all look different, why we all have different thoughts. And so there's a profound amount of wisdom that exists inside of us that we're not necessarily tapping into unless we're activating these things.
So let's go into some of your patients.
Sure.
Fictional names have been changed for the sake of
Absolutely.
privacy. Can you give us some case studies of someone arriving with a particular circumstance and then their output of the fundamental profound change that's happened as a result of this intervention?
I had a young lady come to me several years ago who had fallen off of a ladder and fractured 2 vertebrae in her spine. She had surgery, she was on pain medication, chiropractors, physiotherapists, she was having acupuncture, and her pain was at a scale of, on a scale of 0 to 10, her pain level was at a 9 for 2 years, and the only time that it wasn't was when she slept. She came to see me, and after 2 weeks of this practice, she had 0 pain for the first time in 2 years.
So what happened? How did you do it?
How do you do that?
I did nothing.
What's the secret sauce, brother?
I did absolutely nothing. I helped her to realise that she can get her hands on the steering wheel of her vehicle and she can start to change the chemistry of her brain through her thoughts, through her emotions, and that absolutely affects the body and changes the body.
So I know the concept of pain can be relayed into an idea of being a sensation.
Yes.
For instance.
Yes.
And I've watched. I've got a friend who's a dentist, and he had a patient come in and say, "Listen, I don't want anything. I've got a root canal, but I don't want any anaesthetic. I don't want a needle. But I'm going to meditate through it." Within the first second, he was screaming in the chair.
Yes.
So there's this sort of practical, pragmatic component, reality that I think a lot of people, and that story is a good indication of, balance with this notion of we can overcome anything with meditation. Obviously, I'm a big advocate for that. But how do we know that at some point you're going to need more? She's come in the door the other way, really. She's had the medical interventions and then has to find something else. But I'm concerned a little bit with with that thinking that I can cure and manage anything through my own practice.
Yes.
I think it does go a long way, but when do you start reaching out for help? When do you get someone that comes in and you go, listen, I can take you this far and I'm going to need to have a more allied health solution around you?
I always work with allied health professionals and make sure that we're aligned. It's very important. And most of all for the patient to have that certainty and that confidence that there's a team around them. And that although they may come from different fields or different worlds, they can use those resources and those experiences to support that person. And so I would suggest that, you know, we're living in that time, as I said before, where the scientific world and the medical world is coalescing with the spiritual world and what we've known for thousands of years. And so why not utilise both of those things? Which is why I'm blessed to be here with Dr. Warwick Bishop as well. I can see that happening.
Tell us about hypnotherapy.
Yes.
So is that something someone can do at home by themselves?
Self-hypnosis,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And so how does that look? Like, explain to people that have never done anything like this before what that looks like and what you would actually do.
Yes. Well, let's start with the understanding of how the brain works and how hypnosis works in a very simplified format. And that is, the brain is processing 400 billion bits of information every single second. Your conscious awareness of that is 2,000 bits of information. So if I give your conscious mind a task to focus on, or if I distract the conscious mind, then I can easily start to influence and communicate with the unconscious mind. And so on a very simplified level, a hypnotherapist is doing that. They're distracting or giving a task to the conscious mind so that they can interact with and start to influence that unconscious mind. Now, we can do that for ourselves, and that's been my journey. I did not trust anybody to do anything inside of this mind of mine. I'd had many people that had done all of the wrong things inside of this mind of mine, and so I wanted to learn how to do that for myself. And that is the process of breath work, giving the mind or the conscious mind a task to do while you start to direct the thoughts, direct the emotions. And so how does somebody start with that? They should do my 21-day meditation course for beginners, and that will give a very strong foundation for people to have profound experiences and realise I can.
Because it's a learned skill, right? You've got to learn how to do this. I mean, Carl's been doing it for a long time, and so for people out there that have never done it before, then it's something that they would probably find quite difficult. Like you said with Danny, your wife, that for her to sit still and be able to do that is nearly impossible for her.
Well, look, you've got much more experience than I do with this, but you remain a beginner. The mentality is that you're always learning, so it is a learned skill, but there's an acceptance as well that you have to start again, like all the time. You're starting again and again and again. And I see so many smart people who overthink this, where they judge themselves around their ability to perform this task, when performing the task is the task. Like that, the concept that they get distracted, I'm always thinking I can't sit still. The concept of having a thought and gently returning with compassion to yourself and your breath is the task. That's all there is.
Correct.
Right, yeah, that is the thing.
That's it.
Correct.
And so they're judging the wrong thing here. So if they're actually doing that, they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a bad meditation, we say. And that is because any time that you sit with yourself and you switch off from your phone, you switch off from your relationships, from the TV, or from everything that's externally focused.
Like a circuit breaker,
Anytime that you do that, you're getting your hands back on that steering wheel, and you're saying, yes, we can do all of that stuff later, but for now, we're going to sit and we're going to calm the nervous system, and I'm going to be in control of this time. You can go and do all of the other things that you want to do, because the body, the cells of the body, as I said before, those cells modify themselves to our thoughts and emotions, and 70 to 90,000 thoughts are programmed between the ages of 0 to 7. It actually starts in the third trimester. We're in what's called a hypnagogic state, which is hypnosis. And that is where we get imprinting and programming. And so 99% of all of those thoughts are unconscious thoughts and programs that were put into us by our parents, our school, the TV, the music that was around us. And I don't know about you guys, but I didn't have very positive influences back then. And so I wanted to get my hands on that steering wheel and start to make those changes.
So I'm interested in this for myself. So I like to hit golf balls every day.
Yes.
So my thing is, one part of the golf experience for me is to stand on the range and hit balls for an hour, where I'm just working on something technically in my swing, and that's all I'm thinking about. And the phone's off, mate, no one's bothering me, and that's all I'm doing. Is that meditation?
I would ask lots of questions about the practice. So when you are hitting golf balls, are you actually purely thinking about that golf ball, or are you starting to think about, you know what, maybe I could do this on the podcast? And then when you do start thinking that, do you say to yourself, oh, that's interesting, I had that interesting little thought.
My mind is completely on the golf swing at all times.
And your mind's so small that it can actually be focused on one thing like that, so intense.
And that could be a good thing, couldn't it?
Well, it has proven to be terrific in your athletic career, but I mean, I don't know about the rest of your life.
I'm sort of arguing that you could have such a small mind and actually be a world champion at the same time. But anyway.
But James, why don't we get a technical answer to that question?
Sure. I would say that...
Does that not count? I'm wondering, because...
That absolutely counts. That is mental rehearsal.
I look forward to it I do it most days of the week for an hour at lunchtime. So I'll do, my morning is exercise, work, whatever, and then lunchtime I get a break and I drive the 10 minutes up to the range, and I'm either there with a coach, it gives me a piece of information, and I just hone that for an hour, and I don't think of anything else.
Yes.
And then I leave and I've forgotten about it and I'm back into the day.
Yes.
Is that meditation?
A form of it.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. And a form of self-hypnosis as well. However, we need to engage the entire system. If we have thoughts, I don't know about you guys, I did affirmations for many years, and I'm happy, but I was not happy. Emotionally, I was not happy. There was trauma.
It's like a pretend affirmation.
Correct. And so it never makes it through the brainstem. So we need to be able to engage the unconscious mind, and we need to be able to engage our emotions to be able to make those thoughts work. And so if somebody is in those thoughts and doing those things, perhaps they may be distracted, or perhaps they're feeling, I want to hit that golf ball and do those things, but I'm feeling unconfident about that. I'm not feeling strong. I'm not feeling great about it. Then it's not going to work. It's actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
And so we need to align those two systems together, meaning the thoughts and the emotions, for that to have a profound effect.
I always feel pretty good when I hit balls and walk away from it, so it works for me anyway.
Well, I think it's James's point, that it's a form of meditation. And so there's two things that I'm going to bring up here. One is, Eckhart Tolle's work around stillness speaks.
Yes.
There's nothing that's in terms of a form, it's a higher form surely when we're still, because we get access to more things. Secondly, though, if I look at the output from you, Leachy, you are non-reactive, you're empathic, you're compassionate. You're the things that are the byproduct or the outcome of a strong meditation practice.
Agreed.
Yeah, right.
So you're getting that from somewhere. And so clearly it is.
I was hoping it was.
Something's working, Lee.
Well, I was hoping because I'm like, it's obviously a passion and a hobby.
Yes.
It fills other voids for me, which is I can improve in something in sport that in my past glories I can't be as good as I ever was doing the sports I used to do.
Yes.
Whereas golf I can. So it actually fulfills that competitive need to improve and to be better in a sporting sense. In the same token, the practice seems like, for me, feels like it is meditation.
Yes.
Because I forget about everything else. I can walk in there having a shitty day and for an hour that's gone.
Yep.
And I'm not
it's
thinking
feedback.
about it.
It's ultimate feedback on our thoughts and emotions. If you've got chaotic thoughts and chaotic emotions, I don't imagine that ball's going to be going where you want.
No.
And that's going to spiral into more of what you don't want.
But I think that's that practice of going, I can shut everything else out.
Correct.
And for that moment, for a period of time, I can actually just go to another place.
Yep.
That's a happy place.
Yep.
I suppose if you do it every day, it's just better practice at getting good at it.
Absolutely.
Now, I was hoping that was the case.
Yeah, of course you are.
You're on the right path.
I
Leachy.
haven't even paid for this. It's good.
James, can we just land on two things before we finish?
Of
One
course.
is the excuses that people come up with in terms of not wanting to stop. What have you, in your experience, what's a very common sort of reason why people give themselves an out and not participate? Even if you've suggested this is going to be incredibly beneficial for you, they will put things in the way of doing it. Can you talk to us about some of this? Because I think that's very common for most people to go, I don't have the time, or whatever you're going to tell us.
Sure. I would say that's either a fear or an addiction. We become addicted to the things that we don't like. We become addicted to our thoughts that create emotions of anger or fear or sadness. The body, the cells of the body modify themselves to take up more of those proteins. And so we become addicted to those things even if we don't like them.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Why do we do that? That's crackers.
Because we were never taught how to drive this system.
Is that habit? Is that just you get into a habit? and
Absolutely.
That's just a
that's
habit-driven
the programming.
Yeah.
It's the system works magnificently, but the driver of the system is never taught how to drive it.
Yeah. Wow.
What's the patterns, isn't it? And we've had technology now jump into everyone's lives where it's interfering, no doubt, with the chemistry of the body and everything else. Before we sort of dive down that rabbit hole and never get out, where can people get help? You mentioned your 21-day beginner program. What's the first thing people should be thinking about? And where can they go for help?
The first thing people should be thinking about is that all the tools and resources they need exist inside of themselves. And we don't need to look anywhere outside of ourselves. We can seek validation from external things, but everything we need is inside. And so my suggestion to everybody is start to build a relationship with your unconscious mind, and the bridge to that is through breath, and very simply just observing the breath. Just nasal breathing very gently. Sit with that 5 minutes a day, and you will start to open up the doors of wisdom inside of yourself.
And where's your website? So where do they go to find you and do the course,
Sure.
do the 21-day
Thank
course?
you, sir. They can simply Google James.Z.G.Buckley, or they can search for 21 Days Meditation for Beginners.com.
Oh, that's easy.
It's great.
I'll be on that myself. Well done.
Sounds like you should be. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a privilege
Thanks,
and an
James.
honour, gentlemen.
Good on you,
Thank
buddy.
you very much.